Hello, hi, beautiful. My name is LaQuavia Chambers, or let me get it right. My name is Pastor LaQuavia Chambers, and today is going to be Bible story with Pastor Chambers today. So we'll do this Wednesdays. And so before I get started with the message that I have, which is the topic for it is the why me syndrome. So before I get started with the message or topic or Bible story, I wanted to tell you a little bit about me. I started ministry around 2016, and I say that, and I didn't know what I was doing. God sent me on the job, and He used me in ways that I didn't even think I could be used, and I did not know that He was training me for ministry, and I didn't even think about how far I would go or anything like that. All I knew is that I was at a job with women, and I was so terrified to go because at the time I couldn't get along with women. Not that I got in fights or anything. I just, even as a little girl, just did better with having guy friends. So God sent me on this job, and I'm like terrified, and I'm like, oh Lord, but I'm gonna go because I know you're sending me here. And how I got there is a whole nother story. But just to keep a long story short, 2016, I was in training. 2017, 2018, I opened up a ministry that started off to be Who Am I? It was a blog. And then that Who Am I blog went into Made Beautiful by God. In 2018, I was ordained as an evangelist. And last year, December 2022, ordained as a pastor. And when I got ordained, I just wanted you all just to share a little bit of information about me. God sent me and my husband out to Colorado. Never seen the state in person. Never had a dream to come here. But God made a way to where we can get a home with no job. A really nice home with no jobs. That's a long story too. I'm trying to make it short. But He sent us out here to start a church. Don't know anything about starting a church. We didn't feel qualified to do that, but He sent us so many signs, so many dreams, so many confirmations that Colorado is where we should be. So right now I'm located in Colorado Springs, Colorado. And before this move, I had never been away from my family. So this was a very hard move. And I wanted to have a message. We moved in Colorado in December, right before the Christmas season. Well, during the Christmas season, December 17th. And we got out here like, oh God, we don't know anybody. We don't know how this church thing is going to work. And honestly, we still don't know how. But right now, we're all about being obedient, which is why I'm here today. God wanted me to start posting on social media. You will find out about me that I don't like social media. Not that I don't like what it does, but I don't like putting myself out on social media because I get a little terrified or nervous. I don't know, dealing with my own insecurities. We'll find that out later. But today, here we are. And so I was praying since January, well, really the ending of the year. How am I going to start off this year being Pastor Chambers? How am I going to start off this year being with the message? I'm not going to say a bang, I'm going to say a message. So the first topic, well, one of the topics came to me is the why me syndrome. And the Bible story is going to be coming from Exodus chapter 3 and 4. So when you talk about the why me syndrome, you're talking about whenever God calls you to a place, or like my situation, my husband's situation, God calls us to a place where we feel like it's impossible. This job or this calling is too big for us. So it's the why me syndrome, because when you think about people that have certain syndromes, it's certain characteristics they have, certain symptoms that they have that to say, hey, this is this type of syndrome. But the why me syndrome is when you usually don't feel that you qualify for the calling that God has for you. And like, Lord, why me? Why did you choose me? I don't see how I could fit here. And it's so uncomfortable for me. I don't see how this works for me, or why and there's certain things we start doing when we feel that we're not qualified. So it's a syndrome. It's your opinion, your emotions, and actions that can put you under this category. So anyway, so if you're like me and God has called you to do something, it doesn't have to be ministry. It could be business. It could just be giving your life over to Christ, or something like forgiving somebody that hurts you, or just maybe getting up in the morning, brushing your teeth, washing your face, and getting out that bed, something that God has called you to do that could be simple to somebody else, but to you, it seems like it's hard because maybe you're dealing with depression or whatever the case may be, whatever your own insecurities may be, then you may be dealing with the why me syndrome. So Exodus, if you're not familiar with the chapter, it talks about Moses. And in talking about, and you're going to see me look down because I'm looking at my notes. So when you think about Moses, we know Moses was used to bring the Israelites out of Egypt. They were slaves there, and God used Moses to help set his people free from the Egyptians, from Pharaoh. So we want to talk about the beginning of his story, when God first called him to be something different than what he was. As we all know, Moses was chosen even from a baby. There was a king who called for all babies to be murdered, that were the Israelite sons. He called for them to be murdered, but Moses was saved due to the grace of God. And you'll have to get into that story yourself, read that whole story. But I'm gonna read scriptures to you, and then we're gonna talk about those scriptures. So coming from Exodus 1-11, I'm gonna read that, and then here we go. So it says, get my glasses. So Exodus 3, verse 1, it says, now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that through the bush Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight, while the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called him from within the bush, Moses, Moses. And Moses said, here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you're standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face because he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I've heard them crying out because of their slave drivers, and I'm concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians and to bring them out of the land into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey. The home, which is now the home of the Canaanites, the Hittites, the Amorites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. That's how I'm going to pronounce those. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way of the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now, go, I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? Now, first, this is a very interesting story, because what God did was Moses was going about probably something he does on a regular, doing his chores or just something he does on a regular. And God knew how to get his attention, because sometimes we have those things that cause us to be a little nervous or curious, not nervous, but nosy or curious. And so what God did was allow this burning bush to be burning up. Now, if it was me, I would see the burning bush, probably keep going, and it's not burning up. That's interesting. I don't know how I would feel. Maybe I would pass out. I don't know how I would feel seeing this, but he had to go closer, and God had to tell him to stay back. Now, God tell him what he sees. He's saying, I see my people struggling in Egypt, and I see how the Egyptians, they're not being fair and they're oppressing them. And I am here to answer their call. And I can imagine like, ooh, God, Moses like, God, that's so wonderful. That is awesome. That is great. They are going through so much, and him being the child that lived, the Israelite that actually lived in the house of Pharaoh. He knows that side, and he knows the heart of Pharaoh. So God says, go, you go. I'm sending you, and you're going to be the one to go to Pharaoh and tell him to let my people go. And at this point, this is why it's called the why me syndrome. It's called the why me syndrome, because this was a duty that was so much bigger than Moses. And it was so much bigger than Moses. And he was the person that ran away from his home because he ended up killing one of the Egyptians. So he ran away, and that's why he's in with Jethro and all of that, married with his own family. He had been there, I think it was like 40 years. So God tells Moses to go to Pharaoh. Now, let me tell you, because I can't read all the scriptures. Now, what happened next is Moses' fear started to show. His insecurities, his doubts, even in himself, started to show. It's not that he didn't believe God was talking to him. It's just that he had some insecurities within him that was stronger than what he was hearing, that was speaking louder than his spirit, man. His flesh was speaking louder than his spirit, man. So Moses' fear started to show. He started to question God, like, what happens if this? What happens if I go to Pharaoh and he doesn't listen to me and he doesn't believe that you sent me, who I should tell him sent me? And God is like, I am God, the I am sent you. And he's like, he may not believe me. What if this and what if that? So anytime God is calling us to do something and we're coming back with what if, the what if is showing the insecurity. The what if is showing the doubt. The what if is showing the fear that we have to do what God called us to do, because God is almighty and powerful. And the thing about it is, we go to God and we're asking him these questions, like Moses asking him questions, as if God haven't thought of all the details for the duties he called him to do. God already knew Moses' heart. That's why he chose him. God already knew what Moses been through. He was chosen, and that's why he'd been through the things he'd been through, because his life brought him to the place of leadership, to be the one to call the people out. So after all of these what ifs, and then even when Moses doubted himself, this is the part I love. Even when Moses doubted himself, even when he asked God all these answers, God was patient with him, and God answered every question that he had. And not only did God answer every question he had, God showed him signs and wonders, how things was going to happen. Now, one thing, we look at Moses and we're like, oh, I can't believe you asked God that. Oh, I can't believe you said that. But some of us are stuck in the same place that we are in because we're afraid to ask God questions, because we're afraid to be vulnerable with God. We're afraid to show the weaknesses that we have, and the best person to show those weaknesses to, because he already know the weaknesses we're struggling with, but the best person to be vulnerable with is God. And that's what I like about Moses. Moses was like, oh Lord, not me. What if this? I know the weakness. I know how Pharaoh think. I know how these people are. What if, Lord? And I'm showing you and I'm talking to you. And this is the form of Moses building this relationship in his calling, and his new calling with God, asking God the questions, allowing God to answer him. And God is being patient because God get that he doesn't understand the calling. He doesn't yet get how or see the ending to where he's going. He doesn't see where he's going or how God's going to bring them through. He doesn't see that. So here I have in my notes, although Moses, and I talk about it, but I just want to repeat it like this. Although Moses was afraid to walk in the calling, he wasn't afraid to be vulnerable with God. And that's something that we have to do, not be afraid to be vulnerable with God. And then because of that doubt and that fear that we have to be vulnerable with God, not even to walk in the calling, but just to show God our heart, is the same reason why we're stuck in I can't do it, why we're stuck in not doing what God called us, that place of being comfortable, that place of fear. We're being stuck in a place of fear because we're afraid to walk in the calling that God has for us. And sometimes walking in a calling, no matter how uncomfortable it is, it gives you freedom. Freedom to be exactly who you are. Freedom to love and to forgive, because God would push you. And then you'll have a greater understanding of what he's pushing you to do once you're being obedient. So the next thing we're going to go into is, let's see, we want to go into the scripture. Now we see how vulnerable Moses is being. We want to go into some more scriptures. And remember, once Moses asked God all these questions, God was patient and answered those questions for him. So, and I want to emphasize that, because although we may be nervous or may not feel qualified to do what God is calling us to do, remember that God says we have not because we ask not. Sometimes God will give us the understanding or show us the way if we ask him. So that's what Moses did. He kept asking, and he kept asking until he was satisfied or until he felt like he had some clarity of how God was going to do things. And in this case, God had to show him the signs, where God had to show him how he was going to carry out things. Like he was in a training ground at the burning bush. God said, take your staff. This staff could turn into snakes. God says, do this. Put your hand in your coat. When you take it out, it's going to turn like, have leprosy, and it's going to be like Snow White, and then put it back, and that's how you get it. So he was training him. And this is what we have to remember: when God calls us to do something, he trains us and he get us ready for the call. So after God does all of this training Moses, we end up at Exodus 4:10, and it says, Moses said to the Lord, pardon your servant, Lord. I have never been eloquent, neither in the past nor since you have spoken to your servant. I am slow of speech and tongue. The Lord said to him, who gave human beings their mouths? Who makes them deaf or mute? Who gives them sight or makes them blind? Is it not I, the Lord? Now go, I will help you speak and will teach you what to say. Then Moses said, pardon your servant, Lord. Please send someone else. Then the Lord anger burned against Moses, and he said, what about your brother Aaron, the Levite? I know he can speak well. He is already on his way to meet you, and he will be glad to see you. Now, here's the thing. God was patient with Moses, answering all his questions, giving him signs and wonders, right? But then Moses still could not let go of this doubt, still could not get over his own insecurity. Even when the Lord says, I am going to help you, Moses says, Lord, I cannot speak clearly in front of people. I'm not eloquent enough to speak in front of people. I struggle with my speech. And he could not get over his insecurity. He could not get over not feeling qualified for the job. He couldn't get over these things. And even after the signs and wonders that God performed through him during the practice stage, he still didn't think it was enough. He still doubted. And once God was patient with him, he became angry because of God is like, I am God. I am the one that created you. I'm the one that create every part of not just you, but every person on earth. If you stutter, I can make people hear you straight. If you, like, this is what God's saying, like, I created it. It's me. I'm telling you that I will help you. And Moses, because of his own doubt and insecurities, he says, but Lord, I hear you. I heard what you just said. I know you created us, but can you still send somebody else? And this is still part of that why me syndrome. That why me syndrome is you still being stuck on your own opinions about yourself, your own insecurities. You're still thinking that you have something to do with it. You still thinking that you can change something. You still think that you can hold power. The why me? Because you think Moses thought that he was the one bringing the deliverance, but he actually was a piece. He actually was a vessel that God was using in order to do the work. So God is like, you're not doing the work. That's what he wanted Moses to see. I am going to be the one doing the work through you and in you. And he couldn't see or understand that part. So he wanted somebody else. So God gave him exactly what he thought he needed. He did not need someone to help him in the physical sense, because he had God that was going to be walking with him. And so this is one thing that God is saying to us. When I call you, I qualify you, and I make sure that you are able to walk on this path that I called you to walk on. Nobody else can do it like you. You can, and even with Aaron, God said, Aaron's going to speak as if he's you. But God did not want that. God wanted to be glorified through Moses. And although God got the work done, but it's always consequences. And we can read later on down at these consequences, how our insecurities get in the way and all of that kind of stuff. But God still got the glory. He already knew what Moses was going to say. He already knew how Moses was going to feel. But the most beautiful part of this story is God provided everything that he needed and gave him the desires of his heart, just for saying, I'm going to go. I just want somebody else to speak. I just want somebody else to stand in on that part that I feel like I cannot do. So Moses truly suffered with this why me syndrome. When you know I have issues, when you know that my past is not as clean as somebody else's, when you know that I'm not even a part of the people like I should be, when you know that I feel like I'm not qualified. And God tends to call people that feel like they're not qualified for the job, because he don't want somebody to come in that think that they can do something. He needs us to be totally surrendered to him, to his way and to his will. So yes, you do not feel qualified to walk in the calling God called you. You do not feel qualified to start the business. Oh, and let's not think about the finances that you need. Not think about the tools and resources that you need to do what God called you to do. But the thing is, if God called you to it, he will provide. If God called you to it, he will make a way. If God called you to it, he will give provision. And even if that's people that come in against you. And I wanted to share with me, this is exactly how I've been feeling, trying to build up a church, or even thinking of a plan, or even thinking of Made Beautiful. Me and my husband, we struggled financially for years. And he called me and my husband to come off our jobs at different times, but we did. And then once we came off our job, he's like, oh, move, sell your house and move, sell our house and move. No one is going to accept us. No income, because even if you rent, you got to make this amount of income in order to rent. Your credit got to be good. And the credit it was coming along because God was making he was doing some amazing things, but God has taken care of us. But I've been on this why me? Lord God, I don't see how I can be a role model or a leader among women. I don't see how I can be this pastor. You're talking to the person that's been talked about since I could remember. You're talking about a person that even the doctors were saying that I wouldn't even be able to make it past high school understanding level, that I would have to be in special education. You're talking about a person that has been molested, one that had been talked about even through high school. Didn't even think that I could even have a friend that would sit by my side, because the things that I was going through was too heavy for somebody to want to walk through with me. You're talking about somebody who never had this confidence in herself enough to say, hey sis, let me help you up. I didn't have those things. And financially, I've never been the one that just had everything. God always provide, but I never just had everything. And even when it comes to having children, being attacked and not being able to have children as easy as it, every part of me seemed like it was being attacked. Every part of me seemed like everything that came, I had to fight for it. Everything that came, I had to pray and I had to suffer through it, and it didn't come easy. You're talking about how can I? And so now God sends me to Colorado, and I'm like, Lord, you ordained me in December, and then, no, at the end of November, and then you send me out in December. To me, it just did not make any sense. To me, I just didn't understand it. And the why me syndrome, there's things you go through. You don't just think it in your mind. When you have thoughts that come in your mind, it controls the way you move. It controls the way you react to things. That it kind of controls your life. That's why God tells us to take control of those thoughts, because we have the power over what we actually think. He gives us that power. And so that means if my mind feeling like I cannot do it, I'm not going to do it. If I'm feeling like it's too hard, I'm not going to do it. If I feel like it's by my own way and might, I'm not going to do it. But if I can get my thoughts to be aligned with God and say, it's by God's might, his power, it's not me, it's God. God is working it out. It's God, it's God, it's God, it's God. If we can get it in our minds, then we'll move a little different. If we can think, I can do this with the strength of God, we'll move a little different. We'll make inches, we'll make steps. So I just wanted to come to you all and bring this message to you all, because we're not always going to feel qualified. But are we going to go with our own opinion and doubt God? If God says you're qualified and he called you to do it, are we going to continue to call God a liar? Are we? Because that's what we do when he calls us to do something and we don't do it because we feel like we're not good enough or we don't have what we need. Or when we're saying, God, you called the wrong person, we're saying God don't know what he's talking about, right? And then we're sitting back and we're not doing what he called us to do, and then wonder why am I so unhappy? Why do I feel a void? Why do I feel empty inside? Well, it's because you have to, in order to feel fulfilled, you have to fulfill the will that God has for your life. As simple as that. So I'm just coming out to let you all know, follow God. Yes, you're gonna wonder why God called you. And he will explain, and he will tell you that your past, the one thing that your past, the thing that you think disqualified you to do what God called you to do, is actually the very thing that qualifies you. You think that you've been damaged. You think that you've been broken. You think that the enemy has won. But those very things are the reason why God called you to walk in the thing that he called you to do. So anyway, that's the message that I have. I hope I encourage somebody. And remember, I am Pastor LaQuavia Chambers. I do have a ministry called Made Beautiful by God. It's an all-women's ministry. You can check us out on www.madebeautifulbygod.com. I will also find my social media links and post that here, because I want to do what God has called me to do. No matter how much I feel rejected, no matter how much I feel ignored, because just because I've been through that in the past, that prepared me for now. So I want to take the things that God has taught me and prepared me, and I want to listen to God's word and listen to the will for my life. And I want to be able to walk in that so I can be an encouragement to you, and you have to do it so you can be encouraged, an encouragement to somebody else. So anyway, yes, check out my website, follow me on YouTube, follow me on Facebook. Again, I will get you those links. Follow me on Instagram and let's grow together. Let's do this together. So I love you all. You all have a blessed day. You all have a blessed day. And remember to do the will of God. Mwah.